Where will the housing market go in the UK after the election? That's the question I'm going to look at this evening. Charles Kelly, Money Tips podcast. Let's look at the facts here. Well, first of all, let's look at a couple of pieces of legislation that the Conservative government were trying to introduce. One of them was the Leasehold Reform Act, which has gone through, and the other is the Renters Reform Act, which has been going on for like 4 or 5 years and was ditched. It didn't get through. This is because Rishi Sunak called it a snap general election, and he didn't give the legislators time to get it through. What happens with the legislation? First of all, it's introduced as a bill, right? The Renters Reform Bill, the Leasehold Reform Bill. And then it goes into Parliament, they debate it, they scrutinise it, and all the whole bill is written out and professionally drafted, and then it goes to the House of Lords, the second chamber, and they scrutinise it as well, and they suggest amendments. Now, the House of Parliament, or the Commons, the commoners, have primacy over the Lords. The Lords can't overrule it, but they can make suggestions, they can vote it down, but ultimately Parliament will be the decision maker. So this bill had been knocking about back and forth for quite a while, Renters Reform. And of course, Renters Reform was going to introduce things like the end of no-fault eviction, forcing landlords to consider pets in their homes, maybe having a longer-term contract or rolling lease rather than a 6 or 12-month agreement. But the main sticking block for a lot of landlords was the end of Section 21 notice. Now, Section 21 means you can issue a notice to a tenant, and without any fault, i.e. no fault eviction, you can ask them to leave after 2 months. Now, the tenant doesn't necessarily leave at that point. They could say, well, no, we can't go, we haven't got anywhere to go, take me to court. So you still have to go through the court process if they don't leave, and that could take, under the current circumstances, 6 months or more. And then even at the end of it, the judge could say, well, you haven't served, you didn't give them the gas safety check, you didn't prove that you gave them a copy of the EPC, and then throw it out and start again. So, but most reasonable people would leave when you serve them the notice. So a lot of landlords are relieved that this legislation has fallen by the wayside, but I wouldn't be too relieved because, well, what could happen after the election? Either the Conservatives win, which is looking unlikely, they're 20 points behind in the polls, and then reintroduce it because it hasn't been thrown in the bin, or Labour come in and they are promising a tougher Renters Reform Act because probably most of their voters tend to be renters, young people who are dissatisfied with the whole rental market, and so they could introduce it and make it even more tough. And some of the people in the party are talking about things like long-term tenancies and forcing landlords to do this, forcing landlords to do that, and all sorts of things that are going to make life very difficult for landlords but easier for tenants. Now, because of this bill, apparently in the last couple of years, 30% of landlords will quit the market. I mean, maybe 100,000 landlords will quit the market. Now, it's not just because of this bill. It is also because of George Osborne's famous Section 24 legislation, which has increased taxes for those people who've got their properties in their own name. So if the property is in your own name, it could cause you problems tax-wise, especially if you're a higher rate taxpayer. And there is a way of switching, and if you're interested in switching out of that situation, if you'd like to move your properties from your own name into a limited company without paying all the charges and the taxes, contact me, charles@charleskelly.net. So a lot of landlords will quit because of that, and some will quit really because of retirement. I mean, if you think about this buy-to-let market that's probably been going since the 90s, a lot of landlords are coming to the point where they want to sort of retire and sell up and just have an easier life, because it's not an easy life being a landlord, believe it or not. So that's why a lot of and this is of course forced prices up because there is a shortage of rental properties now. Rents have soared, and so it is causing a problem. So the Renters Reform and the Section 24 notice have not only caused problems for landlords, but they've also caused problems for tenants. And the problems for tenants are not just the fault of the landlord, by the way, it's the fault of the government. They haven't built enough social housing since the 1970s. That is the crux of the matter. And the government seem to want to skirt around it. They want to bring in corporates. There's a big hedge fund called Blackstone are going to buy something like 1,700 homes in the UK. They're going to spend billions, $500 million or so, buying all these houses to rent out. Lloyd's, we know, want to become the biggest landlord in the country, and so this is, the government are trying to push it forward to the private sector, privatise it, in other words. But I don't think that's going to work because, corporate landlords want profits. They don't want people who are unemployed going into their property. They don't want people who can't really afford the market rent, right? So that's what's been happening with the Renters Reform. And the other act that was going through that did pass, and sorry, I just want to backtrack there. I said it's a bill, so if it's the Renters Reform bill was just a bill, it never became an act. But the Leasehold Reform bill became an act because it was approved by both houses, and it's now received the Royal Assent, so it becomes an act. So it's now the Renters or the Leasehold Reform Act, an act of Parliament, if you like. Okay, and that will start to come in force now, and leaseholders should get a slightly better deal. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. It's very watered down, this bill. This act is a watered down situation, and a lot of people believe that it's because of the Tories, that they own land and property, and the people in the House of Lords own a lot of land and property. But I don't think it's just that. I think it just got caught up in the thorns of arguing back and forth, because they're not just dealing with one bill or one piece of legislation. They're dealing with lots of different things. So, but this bill has made it through. One of the things it would change is it should make it easier for leaseholders to extend their lease. They'll get 999-year leases instead of the usual. If they extend, they used to get 150-year leases, or maybe they'd extend it to 125 or 99. But now this won't be an issue. They'll virtually get a freehold if they pay to extend their lease. The other thing that's changed is that in the past the leaseholder was forced to pay the freeholders legal fees, and if they use a top lawyer, it could be thousands of pounds. So that's going to be thrown away. The freeholder will have to pay their own legal fees, and quite right. A lot of the laws around leaseholds and freeholds and landlords is very unfair to people who own leasehold flats. Very, very unfair. Very, very one-sided. It almost goes back to the landed gentry, hundreds of years ago. And there'll be an arbitration service to decide on the price of the lease extension. You won't have to live in the property for 2 years to start extending the lease, which is a big help, really, because the sooner you can get it done, the better. Now, they haven't forced through a cap on ground rents, as was pushed forward, which is partly, I think, because of all the big landlords that have these leases that they own the freehold, and they've got leases out that they're paying high ground rents, some of them thousands and thousands of pounds in ground rent. Well, if you just strip that away, then you're just taking away the value of their asset. Who's going to compensate them? Similarly, if you reformed leaseholds so that leaseholds now no longer exist and the landlord's going to hand over the property to you, that would be a bit of a travesty. That's something you'd expect from a communist country, to just take away all their asset, because a lot of landlords have bought freeholds. They've paid for freeholds. They've used them as an investment because they get this regular ground rent income, and sometimes they control the services and that sort of thing. So you can't just take that away. I mean, think of landlords in the West End. The Earl of Cadogan and the Duke of Westminster owns billions and billions of pounds worth of freeholds in central London. Now, I don't know what's going to happen to him, because generally, if you were extending a lease on a house in Belgravia, he wouldn't give you 999-year extensions. So he's going to have to value those very highly. But the point is, he'll lose that once that's gone. The value of that freehold is much less than it was when he had, say, a 50-year lease on these properties. and we're talking about tens of millions of pounds properties here even for a 50-year lease, if you own a flat in Eaton Square or something like that. So, but I don't think many people are going to cry over the Duke of Westminster. But for smaller freeholders, the government decided, no, we're not going to just rip all this apart and leave them, without an asset. So the cap on the ground rent has not been put through. The other thing is that they're saying no leasehold houses. Believe it or not, big builders like Wimpey's were selling houses on a leasehold basis, which is a complete rip-off. Most of them have stopped doing that anyway, but they will now no longer be able to have a leasehold house. So it's good news for anybody that owns a leasehold flat. Maybe they've got a short lease, under 80 years, and they want to extend it. Well, I would wait until the act sort of goes forward, and I mean it is an act, but you've got to give it a bit of time before it starts filtering through to the legal profession. So I would just wait a month or so, and then start extending the lease when everybody understands. The freeholder understands, the lawyers understand. So I think the difference it will make for most leaseholders, they should be able to extend their lease without paying so much for it, and it should be quicker and easier, and they won't pay so much in legal fees. So all these freeholders that sit back and wait for people to extend their lease, and they think, right, we're going to have a big payday now. Hopefully that, and so that's what's happening with the Leasehold Reform Act now. But the Renters Reform Bill has fallen by the wayside. But I would expect that to be resurrected by Labour if they win as expected. I mean, they'd have to really score a lot of own goals between now and the election in next month, in a few weeks' time, to lose this one. It's theirs to lose, if you like. So we'll have to see what happens. So what else is happening in the market? Inflation is down. We know that inflation is down. Will we get a rate cut? Well, the European Central Bank did cut rates about a week ago, so possibly, but they're not expecting the Bank of England to cut rates. Although the economy has not really grown last month. It flatlined. It's only grown in the previous quarter by 0.7. So it's bobbling around, almost negative growth. It's just flatlining. Whereas other parts of the world, in America, for instance, they're racing ahead. But Europe and several countries in Europe are not really moving forward. Of course, Asia and China, they just race ahead, and their economies are growing. I was in Asia recently, and everything's buzzing there, and there's much more confidence around in these countries where the economy's growing, investment is coming in. But in the UK, it's kind of stagnating at the moment. But on the housing market front, some pundits, some experts are predicting housing market primed to surge after the election. Now, of course, the experts in question are the Halifax. They're the biggest lender in the country, and they're the ones trying to buy all these properties through the Lloyd's banking group, which own the Halifax. So, of course, they would say, and they never say the market is crashing or anything like that. Of course, they're going to say the market is going to boom. So, and they're putting this down to shortage, a possible cut in interest rates. Inflation is down now, so why? I still don't know why we've got interest at 5.25% when inflation is lower than that. Now, when inflation was 10 or 11%, yeah, you needed higher interest rates, but now inflation is below those interest rates. So why are they not cutting? This is why the economy is stagnating, because the cost of borrowing is too high. The cost of people's mortgages are too high. So why are they going to go out and spend money on new cars and new things and extending their houses when the taxes are so high, the cost of mortgages are still high, and the cost of borrowing? I mean, it was I think the same group, the Lloyd's banking group, have said that unauthorised overdrafts will now be charged at 50%. I think it's 49.9%, 50%. I mean, it's just ridiculous. When if you have an account with them in an old savings account, you're probably getting 1%. So 50 times what they're paying for their money, they're going to charge people on an overdraft, which is just a complete rip-off. So, these banks are making a lot of money out of this, and frankly, they need to reduce interest rates immediately to a level where it will stimulate the economy. And this is what really the Conservatives should have done in the last. I know that it's in the hands of the independent Bank of England, but they could have influenced the Bank of England to get interest rates down and then start the economy growing. But for some reason, Rishi Sunak has called this snap election rather than wait until the autumn when the figures might have looked better, unless he thinks things would look worse. So for some reason, he's rushed this through. They're not really prepared for it, and maybe they thought they'd catch the other parties on the hop, but they're not really prepared for it. And in the meantime, in the polls, the Reform Party, Nigel Farage's party, a sort of a revamp of the old UKIP, if you like, are just a couple of points behind the Conservatives as the second party. So they're third party. So this is looking really bad for the Conservatives in terms of the election. And really, Keir Starmer just has to stand there and smile and not say too much, and he'll be in number 10. So we shall see. So where the market is going after the election, we don't know. I certainly think the buy-to-let market under a Labour government will suffer, because landlords are not going to be encouraged to get into that when there's this anti-landlord legislation coming through, and that's going to scare a lot of people off. So there you go. That's what's happening. I hope that interest rates will come down, if not this month, next month, by the Bank of England. And I just hope that things will settle down so that people can get cheaper mortgages this year, because a lot of people are coming off of fixed rates of 2 and 5 years this year. I've got a mortgage coming off of a fixed rate in the autumn, and I'm hoping that by that time that happens, fixed rates would have come down. At the moment, the fixed rates are still at 5 and 6%. So that's not good news when you've been on a rate of, say, 2 or 3%. Your payments could double. So this is why I think a lot of people haven't got confidence to go out and spend. And this is why you see shops closing, restaurants not doing as much trade as they want. And they're struggling. A lot of small business people, small traders are struggling. And I see it all the time. I talk to people. I go to networking meetings. It's not easy out there. Okay, so there you go. Now, we know that the things are difficult for people out there, and we know that the cost of living crisis, inflation at 2%. If you're having a laugh, inflation is more like 10%. We know. I went to buy something recently. I think it was filters for a water jug filter. I was horrified. I thought it doubled since I last bought them, and that was only maybe a couple of years ago. So it's crazy. But look, if you are struggling, and if you're looking to improve the way you manage your money, or to make more money so that you can start investing for your future and become financially free, because we'll all have to row our own boat, right? We can't rely on the government state pension anymore. The state pension is a bust Ponzi scheme. There's no money in the kitty. They're just taking taxpayers' money now and paying it out to pensioners. So don't rely on that. At the moment, it's 67, the retirement age. It will eventually go to 70 and 75. And eventually we'll all be working until we drop. So don't rely on that. We've got to row our own boat. We've got to build our own future. And a lot of people don't understand how to do this. They don't understand where to invest, what forms of investment will give them the best return, and in terms of risk factor, tax benefits of saving in this or that. So look, I do run a webinar most Wednesdays, and I'll put a link up to that. And it's called Mastering Your Finances and Unlocking the Secrets to Wealth, and building your money up so that you can become financially free. So do have a look at that. It will be on a Wednesday night, if not this Wednesday coming, depending on where you're watching this, or when you're watching this. There will be a webinar coming up, and I'll put a link up there so you can register. So register for Unlocking the Secrets of Financial Freedom in 3 simple steps. So this webinar will take you through 3 simple steps to get control of your finances immediately, and so that you're in control of your money, and then show you how to invest for the future to build real wealth and become financially free. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but I think with this webinar, it will certainly change your way of thinking towards finances, because don't rely on the government to help you, or the state system to help you. I think things are going to get serious for a lot of people, and and they said recently that 25% of self-employed people have got no pension plan whatsoever. So they've got a company scheme. They're not saving for themselves. And, and if you're a self-employed builder or plumber or a carpet fitter or whatever, how long can you work for? You can't just work forever. Eventually you just will not be physically able to work. If you're climbing up a ladder or you're doing some physical work or whatever it is, we can't all work forever. So do think about that. Join me for unlocking the secrets of financial freedom in 3 simple steps. I'll see you there. Click on that link below somewhere here and register. It's a free webinar with me in person, and I'll see you there.